You may be wondering why I'm underneath the vehicle again, looking at the wheel cylinder for the brake on the rear wheel, looking at the Zert fitting that I just finished bleeding the other day, and it's because that I realized that I kind of left out some important things in the video that I probably should have mentioned. When you're working with used vehicles, old vehicles like this thing's like almost 40 years old, 4 decades. And these Zert fittings, right here are old, and they've probably been used before many times, loosened and tightened. That they kind of get loose, especially when you loosen them up to bleed the fluid. They may wiggle a little bit after you crack them open and turn them about a quarter turn, and they'll wiggle around, and when you're releasing pressurized brake fluid through the hose that you have attached here, sometimes you can suck air in right by the threads. So it'll suck air from the outside here, and it'll suck it into the brake fluid, and you'll get a bunch of air bubbles. And you'll probably wonder, why am I getting all these air bubbles? Why won't they stop? Well, one reason is you might be sucking in air right here, because when you crack it open, it's kind of wiggling a little bit, creating an air gap in the threads. One way that you can tackle this problem is you can just put new Zert fittings in. Take this one out before you start bleeding. Put a new one in. Now you're going to have to find one that has the right threads on it. This is probably metric threads, but you're going to have to check. And if you can't do that, and you need to bleed the brakes right now, what I do is take some grease, some wheel bearing grease, and a tiny little brush, a little tiny brush the size of a pencil, and you can dab that brush into some grease, and you can just brush it on all around this fitting. And what that will do is that will seal the air gap, and it won't be able to suck the grease past the outside where you applied it, because it's too thick and heavy. And then when you go to crack open the Zert fitting, it just kind of, the grease just kind of sticks to it and stays there while you're turning it open. And what you have done is you've blocked any chance of air going past that thread and into your line while you're bleeding it. So that's one good tip. And that'll keep you from having to replace your Zert fitting, which still works, by the way. Another tip that I wanted to give is you never want to let this bottle run out of brake fluid, and you don't want your reservoir to run out of brake fluid either. if you don't check your bottle of brake fluid regularly, and usually it'll get down low, it'll take a lot of brake fluid to bleed the rear brakes, because that's the longest brake line away from the reservoir. So if you run out of fluid in this, you're going to just push air and push all this fluid out of this master cylinder reservoir. And if you do that, if you run out of cylinder, master cylinder, you run out of oil in it, you're going to get airlock in your master cylinder, and you won't be able to get it out unless you bleed the master cylinder, which means you have to disconnect the brake lines to the master cylinder and pump the piston inside the master cylinder with a master cylinder bleeding kit to bleed the air out of the master cylinder. So you'll have to basically start all over again. So always check your bottle and make sure that you don't empty out. Now, if you want to refill, if you notice you're getting low on brake fluid, what you want to do is you want to disconnect this. You should always have fluid in this line. So if you're getting low, when you go to check your bottle, make sure you got brake fluid still in this line, and that means that you're constantly getting pressurized fluid in here, so you shouldn't be running out of fluid in the reservoir as long as you got fluid in this line constantly. So if you want to refill this, top it off again, because you have to continue bleeding. Disconnect it right here. Do not relieve the pressure with this valve. Keep the pressure, air pressure going. You're all hooked up. You still got air pressure. Quickly disconnect this. Quick disconnect. Okay. Then relieve your air pressure. Then take your cap off. Top off your bottle again. And then you can connect your hose and reapply air, and it should, it'll just refill the line with fluid again once it's under air pressure again, once it's pressurized again. And that's it. You never want to take this cap off while the whole system's hooked up and pressurized still, because you'll relieve the air pressure out of the system, and you'll reverse draw fluid out. All the fluid will be sucked back in to the bottle, and then you'll have air pressure again, or you'll have air in this system again, and then you'll have to disconnect and then check your reservoir again for fluid. You'll have to take this back off and check that you didn't suck out the fluid out of here. Top it off, fill it back up, hook this back up, and just hook it all back up all over again and repeat the whole process. So there is a proper way of operating this so you don't get air in the master cylinder, and you don't push air into the master cylinder and get air in the system again. I don't know if the instructions on this cover that, how to do that, how to refill the bottle and stuff, but I was thinking about it, that I left out some of these steps, and and it was bugging me, so I thought I'd make a little update to this one-man brake bleeding procedure. And I think that's about it. Have a good day. It usually only takes like 1 or 2 times of bleeding all 4 wheels out. You know, like I said before, if you've got old Zert fittings that are worn out, they're going to wiggle a little bit. They might be sucking in air at the threads. You know, just brush on a little grease, wheel bearing grease around it. And then wipe the connection part where you hook up the hose off with a rag, clean and dry, so that the hose, you know, the rubber hose will seal properly, won't slip off. You don't want to get grease on that area where you install the hose. But just near where the Zert fitting screws in to that wheel. That's the only place that you need to put grease at. And that'll prevent air from being sucked in while you're bleeding. Or you can just replace the Zert fittings before you get started with new ones. That's all I got for you. Out.